factors influencing future international tourism, including social media, international security, and diaspora growth. In terms of the 4Ps, today we're looking at possibility. I won't put your names up here, but they'll be on the slides. Each of you have a specific factor that you're investigating in your groups of 5, either social media, international security, or diaspora growth. I'm just going to give you some guiding tips about each of them and direct you to the resources that are available for you to consider. There's some good case studies in both Codrington and Course Companion. Okay, so for social media, you might want to consider the types of platforms that are driving tourism at the moment, and also the types that are discouraging people from visiting specific tourist sites. How do they influence individuals to travel? To what extent are people relying on social media these days for tourism, and why? How many viewers do these platforms receive? Include some specific quantitative data if you can. And also, as we're looking at possibility, you need to also consider what the predictions are in terms of how social media will continue to drive tourism or decrease tourism. Any predictive quantitative data. Here are some examples of different types of social media. Some are in your textbooks, such as TripAdvisor. People trust the reviews on TripAdvisor more than they do now compared to going to a travel agency, for example. And we're seeing this shift from these transnational corporations organizing these trips for people to people now individually accessing these different services independently. And so young people are more likely to plan a trip themselves. People like in my father's age, for example, in their 60s, much prefer to have a tour guide take them everywhere and not have to worry about the logistics of it. So you can see here, Chris Burkhardt is known for traveling off the beaten path and visit primary tourist resource related sites and places that are considered in the exploration stage of Butler's model for tourism. And so, yeah, people tend to trust these sources a little bit more. International security. You need to consider the types of events that lead to threats to international security, as well as examples that have impacted international tourism, and predict what are the possibilities. What's likely to occur over time. So when we think about pandemics, would these types of incidents occur more frequently as we become more globalized, for example? Here are some of the examples we've discussed before. Do we recognize this image? Yes, we've looked at it before. It's a ghost hotel in Egypt due to the 2011 Arab Spring protests, which led to civil unrest, terrorism, and a sharp decline in Egypt's economy, meaning that people were unable to complete the construction of these tourist resorts, and there was no incentive to either because people weren't visiting anymore. Another type of international security threat is disease. And in this case, the recent cholera outbreak in Africa started in 2023, but continues to spread to present day. We can see Malawi is one of the countries most affected by this. And then we have smarttraveler.com or .gov, basically government advice on where not to travel to. Russia, Ukraine, as well as neighboring countries such as Belarus are some of the countries that pose international security threats due to military conflict, and Australians would be at the risk of arbitrary detention or arrest. So it isn't safe, and a lot of these bordering Eastern European countries have actually closed their borders due to the security threats. We also have another recent example, which is the Israel and Palestine conflict, Again, volatile security situation, armed conflict, civil unrest, and terrorism as the stated reasons for why it would not be wise to travel there. Okay, so diaspora tourism. What is diaspora tourism? You need to think about that. Have a look at the Codrington textbook as well as course companion. How do diaspora tourists behave differently from other tourists when visiting their country of heritage? Provide examples of how diaspora tourism has been marketed through niche tourism such as genealogy, cemetery, and slavery tourism. I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. So essentially, this is an emerging market that companies are trying to capitalize on. And so diaspora is essentially the dispersed or scattered population that has migrated from their homeland and retained family links to the country of origin. So for example, here we can see that India has the world's largest diaspora. So a large number of Indian migrants living in other countries return to India predominantly for visiting friends and family. So this is known as VFR tourism. That's the main reason. We've also got an example here of people capitalizing on tourism, diaspora tourism specifically. So travel by individuals of African descent to their ancestral homelands, often seeking to connect with their heritage, explore their roots, and experience their historical connections is really common now. And here we have the Marina Project, which is located in the Republic of Benin in West Africa. So the country hopes to market itself as a major destination for Afro-descendant tourists in the diaspora. We can see here the life-size replica of a slave ship in the Project Marina. And so this form of tourism is closely linked to the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade and the subsequent forced migration of millions of Africans to the Americas. It can be considered a type of heritage tourism or slavery tourism because it involves visiting sites like the slave ships, but also forts, castles, and museums that commemorate the slave trade and its impact. All right, so that's a brief guide to what you'll be covering. Good luck. The instructions are all here, right? You can see, have a look at those videos and complete a 5-slide presentation. Now, you aren't limited to what I've just discussed. By all means, you can pick whichever case studies you like. Use a wide range of different resources and ensure that each group member is allocated something so that tasks are distributed evenly. Good luck.